Welcome. This is Winsome Gayle bringing you another edition of Brief Encounters. Today we are bringing you a continuation of our series on well-being, the 6 Pillars of Well-being, brought to you by the well-being community of the DC Bar. We have a special guest with us today to discuss the pillar of spirituality, Claudia Cauterucci. Claudia is a DC-based psychotherapist and best-selling author of 2 recent books, The Empath Leader, Transforming Humanity's Algorithm, and Healing from Narcissistic Abuse, Rebuild from Relationship Trauma, and Find Your Light Again. We're so excited to have you here with us, Claudia. Thank you for joining us today.
You, Winsome. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Awesome. So, Claudia, can you tell us how you got into psychotherapy and spirituality?
Yes. Everything that I'm doing now was because of my own personal journey. And I do have a trauma background in myself, inside of myself. And my spirituality, I feel like they're both the same thing for me. And they're both about what I call the inner journey. The going inside. Spirituality requires that we go inside, and so does psychotherapy. So in my teens, I feel like it's been an unrolling, evergreen rug of self-discovery throughout the years, but it started with I went to a Quaker high school, and so it was amazing. I know it was amazing to be teenagers sitting in silence together and being asked to go inside. That was such a phenomenon to me to start exploring that side of myself. But in my 20s, what I call the sleeping volcano, the explosion of our unconscious and sleeping volcano, which happens to most of us in our 20s, whether it be through breakups or drinking too much or realizing things about our past, about our childhood, I began to have those explosions of my unconscious. And so I went into therapy, deep therapy, group therapy, and individual therapy. And I was sold, I was hooked on it. And even though I was an international development consultant at the time, I started to swing towards clinical psychology because I liked the exploration of self. And then that just turned into so many things externally, Winsome. Like, I was the founder of the Festival Church in Washington, D.C., part of the Servant Leadership School, which worked for social justice in Washington, D.C. And it just kept going like that. I created dynamic meditation. So everything outside was harvesting from all the seeds that I was doing inside. And now I've been in private practice as a psychotherapist for over 25 years. And I feel that my spiritual journey has really grown from very foundational. I was raised a Catholic and then expanded, explored Buddhism, etc., metaphysics, all of it.
That sounds phenomenal. I want to take it back to basics for a minute. You've touched on a lot of different things. You touched on some religious practices, meditation, and just understanding yourself, leading you to understand other humans and help other humans to develop themselves with psychotherapy. Back to basics question. Claudia, can you explain for us what spirituality is? What is the spiritual pillar of well-being?
Listen, Winsome, this is very particular. So I'm going to just own that and disclaim it. I feel that it's all about the ability and the increasing tolerance to go inside first. Because as you're able to meet yourself, your layers, your own programming, whether it's racial, ethnic, family, trauma, the more you can go inside and tolerate that experience, I feel like the more we can touch the outside, begin to expand into what I call the energetic fields. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And the energetic fields, all that is all the conversations that we're having in the invisible. Because as we go inside, we have access to that still inner voice. And that inner voice can be our own intuition, our own higher consciousness. It could also be whatever people want to call it. It could be God, it could be angelic frequencies. But the idea here is that we do have a very wise, well intentioned, compassionate inner voice that we can access through our inner journey and then slowly through our outer journey. It does start with the ability and the tolerance to go inside.
That is helpful and it's expansive. It's not limiting, it sounds like. Am I right on that?
Yes. And tell me what you mean by expansive. Let's have a conversation a little bit about that.
Yeah, certainly. It sounds as if by going inside, one could connect with our humanity and with other people's humanity as well. So the journey might start within, but it also expands to without and potentially beyond humanity. So it sounds very expansive. I know the ABA's report references on well-being, and for those of our listeners who have been following this series, they will have heard about the ABA report and the 6 pillars of well-being. But the ABA report references not only the inner journey, but also, spirituality can mean something that brings you awe. You talked about some people having a religious belief, but it does not have to be a religious belief. So it
No,
sounds like you are talking about that inner journey potentially connecting us beyond ourselves. Is that right?
absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about humanity and understanding others, because that is an actual spiritual process. So I hold that, well, the principle of I am you and you are me, that the more we know, and this is psycho spiritual, by the way, this is psychological as well, that the more you know your own shame, your own giddiness, your own silliness, your own desperation, the more you know your own need for another, your own desires, the more you know that, the more you have points of connection to others anywhere, right? This is why music is so powerful. You do not need to speak the same language as others. Music is extremely spiritual because it's energetic. We feel a lot of energy. So the more we know ourselves deeply, actually, the more we can touch those places in others, wherever they are on the planet. And it's a language, it's a primary language that we have to others. And that in itself, right, that points of connectedness is a spiritual process.
So, Claudia, let's talk about attorneys, my tribe, and the tribe here on Brief Encounters. Attorneys and the people who love them and the people who work with them. We're in a very high pressure situation oftentimes. You mentioned social justice work. My career has been dedicated to mostly social justice work, but I've also worked in private practice. And one thing that we share is that we give our work, well, our work provides us with a lot of meaning and purpose. At the same time, that meaning and purpose and that sense of responsibility and pressure that we face can lead to burnout. And I myself have touched the flames of burnout. So, how can spirituality help us to avoid burnout or maybe to treat burnout?
Well, Winsome, I'm really thankful that this is actually focusing on attorneys, because can I give you a little bit of my psycho spiritual framing
Yes.
of who attorneys are on planet Earth? So I want to say that attorneys are the sort of protective gladiators of our time. Attorneys on planet Earth are actually the protectors. So if we really see like different archetypes on planet Earth, and we're not going to talk about whether you think it's for a good cause, a bad cause, all of them are protecting someone. And they are a shield, they are a guardian, they are a gladiator. So this is really important to highlight from a psychospiritual perspective. Because what that also means is that attorneys, and let me use a little bit of my own language, are always at war. Energetically, they're always at war. And it's really important to honor and validate that. They're always prepping for war, right? And it doesn't always have to be warlike. Yes, there's appeals, there's, pleas and all of that. I get it. I get it. I'm being very archetypal here, sort of mythologically archetypal. But what that means in psychospiritual language is that attorneys are constantly in a hypervigilant state. They are looking for danger. They are seeing where the cracks are all the time. And those are all trauma responses. So attorneys are constantly hypervigilant. The other thing about attorneys that I really wanted to talk about is that I'm going to be dramatic here, but they're in the bowels of humanity, right? Like in the deep, dark places of humanity. And that takes a very high toll. And it doesn't matter if you're in corporate America or you're a public defender. This particular role touches trauma all the time, including having secondary trauma. And I'm not sure if you all talk about that a lot, but if we're going to link it to well being and spirituality, we have to talk about how much attorneys go through. They're expected to go through. They expect themselves to go through. They pummel through it. And that's why they burn out. Secondary trauma is when someone, because of a profession or because of their particular role in a group, whether it's a family or an organization, a firm, whatever group that they're in, they are witnessing on a daily basis, maybe on a weekly basis, someone else's primary trauma. And it's sometimes delegated to the backstage because they're not the one experiencing the trauma. But you better believe that when you're listening to high levels of trauma or stories of trauma, you will be impacted in your dreams and what you're thinking about and what you're targeting. I'm sorry, this is getting a little intense, but Winsome, we cannot talk about burnout in attorneys without talking about how their body is gauged, meaning they're always prepping for danger, they're hypervigilant. And so, thank you to these great protectors. Let me answer your question now. What burnout requires, dear attorneys, is a deep cleanse. If you just think of it mechanically, we already come with all the stuff of our childhood, of our family systems, of our race, of our ethnicities, of our gender. So we're already have those files inside of us. So if we add a profession where there is secondary trauma and where you have to protect yourself so much or be looking for danger, you're getting very, very, very full. Think of it mechanically. You're just getting more and more and more. It's like a room full of filing cabinets. It's overflowing. And so if you think of it mechanically, which is how I like to work with folks, is to just start cleaning that out. You get burnt out because you're not doing deep, energetic, and internal cleanses. There's no recovery time. So again, if we go mechanical, when we work out, when we lift weights, recovery time is so essential to the building of the muscle, right? We tear the muscle, we recover. That's how we build the muscle. Recovery is so important. And usually, my experience with attorneys at burnout is that they're not recovering, they keep going. I mean, if you think of tactics with prisoners of war, that's what you do. You keep them awake and going, 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 going without any recovery time. So when we're burnt out, we start to touch on our most base feelings. We're exhausted, we're angry, we're in tears, and we don't know why. And it's basically because we begin to completely overflow. And there's, other than conversations like this, which is why it's so needed, there's this great expectations that attorneys should not stop and recover and do deep cleanses. And it behooves you to do that. because of who you're working with. If you want to really give the best type of service, that goes for psychotherapists too, by the way. We need a lot of recovery. Does that fully answer? I really wanted to answer that one fully, Winsome.
Yeah, you've given us a good perspective of some of the challenges and reasons behind the burnout. And I'm going to take the baton from that one onto the next question because I think it leads very well into the next question, which is you're talking about those recovery practices and that internal work, cleaning out that long line of cabinets and what have you. For some of our younger listeners, they may not be familiar with with the filing cabinets. I don't know.
True.
Your firm may just have a whole bunch of data. It's all in the cloud
Just think
now.
of like downloads that you're not cleaning out on your laptop.
In the cloud or on your laptop. But let's turn to some of those practices. In the Empath Leader, your book, you have a chapter that's dedicated to some playful and powerful practices. I say playful because it gets us back in touch with ourselves in many ways. And you list a whole host of practices, but I'm going to name a few of them and then we can turn to one or two of them. So you talk about rewilding, re-engaging with nature. You talk about having rituals, daily grounding practices, and of course, self-compassion as being important. Now, I have an experience of what you would call rewilding, which is when I was recovering from my experience having done this social justice work, impact litigation, and what you're talking about with respect to the secondary trauma, hearing some it's just some terrible stories that I held throughout my career. One way in which I got back to myself was by taking a pilgrimage and training and walking for that pilgrimage, the Camino de Santiago. It was very helpful for me personally. What do you mean by rewilding? I don't know if I did it right, Claudia. It felt right to me, but what do you mean by rewilding?
Oh, yeah. The Camino de Santiago is such a deep cleanse. I would certainly, for most people who are walking the Camino, it's such a deep cleanse. So, and let's talk a bit about play when you say playful. Listen, the reason why play is so important is because we can only play when we feel safe. So I want everyone to be thinking about someone you play with, someone you laugh with, someone you giggle with, someone you do something fun with. And so it is a measure. Playing is a measure of feeling safe, whether that's in relationship, whether that's wherever. So play is a very important psychospiritual word. Rewilding means, listen, nature is a really easy hack. It just is. Nature is a hack if you get outside, if you get around trees, if you look up at the sun. It's just an, even if you're in the middle of the city, actually just walk and look up. There's something that feels incredibly expansive. The body feels it immediately. And this is one of the things that we can say to folks like, take a walk. And one of the things that has been studied over and over is the experience of EMDR, which is the moving from your eyes from side to side when we're walking. And EMDR is eye movement desensitization. Okay. And what the idea there is that we're actually, without even knowing, decluttering ourselves of memories. This might be where you hear the inner voice. Rituals, I spell rituals. And the idea there is how do we make the ordinary into extraordinary? And it just adds a little bit of magic to all the things that become so ordinary that they can lead us to depression, they can lead us to anxiety. And one of those things is pacing. So rituals add pacing because I contend that rushing, which attorneys do constantly, is an actual traumatic response, right? That they're not pacing. And because rushing has embedded in it this idea of like, I'm going to get in trouble. There's not going to be enough time. There's a lot of lack mentality in it. So grounding, right? You talked about grounding. Grounding is basically coming back to the self. It doesn't have to be these huge, I mean, there are grounding exercises where you take your shoes off and you walk on the ground or you sit on the ground or you picnic. Yes. But when I think of grounding, it's much easier. I like to make things really practical, is how you come back inside of yourself into the body. And one way to do it, if listeners want to do it now, is just put your hands on your chest, put your hands on your face. And the idea here is to come back from dissociating, which is leaving your body. And attorneys have to do that all the time. Attorneys have to dissociate from the material they're working with. So these are all ways of coming back. And self compassion, Winsome, is the hardest. I find it the hardest. And the hardest to believe. Like, what do you mean self compassion? Right? But it's actually the highest psycho-spiritual alchemical dissolution that there is, which is to just say, listen, one of the tools that I give is just say, I'm sorry to yourself. Sorry you feel so rushed. I'm sorry this is hard. And again, what to do with self-compassion is to lean back, put your hands on your body, on your chest, on your face, on your tummy. But self-compassion, believe it or not, requires some decluttering of what's happening on the inside.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You already answered my last question on this series with respect to these practices, which is a simple way to access these practices. You've talked about just walking, just going outside, just being in a different environment than your office, be it home or in some building downtown or wherever it is. You've also talked about some of the techniques. We don't even have to leave our desk. I would advise to leave our desk. That's one of the things I advise folks I work with in my business, WG Advocate. But if you don't have time to leave your office, which is, what you're talking about, you can simply just place your hands and like do a self check-in. So thank you so much for those very simple actions that people can engage in to access their spirituality. Is there another simple takeaway? Did I miss something, Claudia?
Well, I think let's highlight that so many people don't do these practices because it feels so lofty, and that included me. I needed psychology and spirituality to not feel so incredibly huge and lofty. I needed very simple steps, like for a lot of folks to just sit on a mat for 30 minutes feels absolutely overwhelming. And for folks that I work with high anxiety, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, ADHD, it was going to be very hard to do that. So take a walk. And I agree with you. If you can get outside, walk around the building, look up. I know that sounds bizarre. I give very bizarre things. Look up, because most times you're looking down. You might be looking at people. Try looking up to the sun, to the height of the buildings, and watch the experience that provides you with. Definitely the idea of leaning back in your chair if you're in a staff meeting. And Winsome, you know my work already. I start with very practical, mechanical ways of just beginning the inner journey. Lean back, because when we're leaning forward, if you could feel the difference in energetic capacity when we lean back, we're actually calmer, we're in our bodies, we're sitting in what I call the body throne. Walking, people think this is sort of too trendy, but take a breath. The breath is a universal prayer. It has no language, it has no culture, it's complete humanity. And it's the source of all life. Take a deep breath. When it comes to biology, it has to calm the central nervous system. So we took a deep breath before we started this podcast to just align our energetic fields. Rituals, let me give you something for rituals. Add music to any of your environments. If you want to light a candle, as the process of lighting a candle, not because you're like, oh, I'm so spa, but when we light candles, something happens. I always say, wear the nice underwear. I know that's hilarious, but it's actually true. It has a lot of intention. It's hilarious, but I'm going to offer it. It's like, use the nice plates, even on a Tuesday night. Have 1 minute silences. Listen, put it on your phone. Super easy. Decide, I'm going to do 1 minute of silence. Catch your rushing. If you're rushing, take a deep breath, right? Chop wood, carry water. Just move nice and slow. I hope those are helpful. They're very quick.
These are very helpful, especially for attorneys who, as you tapped into, and I know you've worked with a lot of attorneys, we're constantly in a rush. We constantly think we don't have enough time. I appreciate your giving us some hacks that literally take seconds to 1 minute, and then you can go beyond.
And they count. They're exponentially psychospiritual.
Thank you. Claudia, if folks could take away one thing about spirituality as lawyers, what do you think they should take away?
That it's doable, that it's mechanical, that you don't have to start with any big spirituality, that it's actually throughout your day. The idea you want to have is that you're threading your inner journey throughout your day. So just start little, in little blocks, in little 1 minute. I always say your car and the public bathrooms are your churches. Go into the bathroom, put your hand on your chest, take a deep breath. That's it. You're done. You've gone inside. You've reached for the astrals. I always talk about Casey Kasem. This definitely dates me, y'all, but he was a DJ that always said, keep your feet on the ground and reach for the stars. And I really believe in that. Keep your feet on the ground, but keep reaching for the stars.
Thank you. And how can people learn more about spirituality and also connect with you?
Well, certainly on my podcast, I have a podcast called Heaven on Earth Podcast. And this is how I talk. I try and combine the practical day to day. That's my thing. That's my language is I combine practical day to day hacks with high spirituality. And I talk about it from multiple points of view. So just look me up on claudiacauterucci.com because I have a series of a sequence where you start by just emotional intelligence, learning yourself. And then I'm going to have a lab where we can meet weekly. And then we move out into serving the world, but we have to serve the world, especially during these times with a calm central nervous system. We do. So spirituality is daily, you guys. It's daily and it's accessible and it's as easy as taking a walk.
Thank you. And Claudia, can you mention that website again?
Yes, www.claudia, Claudia, Cauterucci, Cauterucci.com.
Thank you. And we'll be sure to put that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about spirituality and lawyers and why it's important for us to learn that. Join us tomorrow for our final pillar of lawyer well-being, the social pillar. To our listeners, thank you for joining us on this conversation. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe to Brief Encounters and be sure to check out DC Bar's Lawyer Assistance Programs Toward Wellbeing podcast channel. You will find information and resources that will help you continue your well-being journey. If you enjoyed these types of conversations, please join the well-being community. We have live conversations, we have events, we have things you can connect with online at the DC Bar's website, and we welcome your ideas about how we can serve you better as a community. Thank you so much for joining us today. Take care of yourselves. Your well-being is important to you, the people who love you, and your clients. Thank you.